Hi everybody, it's Dr. V. Welcome back to my channel. I apologize for having been absent the last couple of weeks. I haven't really been on much. That's just my own life. I've got a sudden increase of professional responsibilities and other things that have really transitioned. It's all very good stuff, but it has required a lot more of my attention in those arenas and less attention to the channel. So I will be more than likely posting one video per week, more as led and as I'm led and as time allows. So just wanted to make note of that. Also, I am really trying to find the right camera setup to do more of the face-to-face videos. I really like that format, but at this point I just haven't found the right camera, so I'm going to continue doing it this way. So all that aside, I am here today doing a reading for you. For those of you that are in soul connections, whether that's a twin flame, a soulmate, whatever label you like to use to identify your connection. And this reading is about what it is that is being mirrored to you, and we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper to see what is going on. So we're going to start off with the Mirror cards by Charlie and Liddell. Spirit, please use me as a clear channel for communication. May the messages that come through be in the highest good of all those concerned. I draw a sacred circle around this space, setting my ego to the outside. I call upon my ancestors, divine love, and higher wisdom to be with me, guide me, protect this energy, this message, the listener, and the person for whom they're listening. Interesting. I love this. So the first card that's coming out, or the card that's coming out for mirroring rather, is empathy. So what it is that the two of you are mirroring to each other right now is empathy. That is to say, it's about learning how to step into someone else's shoes and to feel their pain and to understand their circumstances, understand their life, to really walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Okay, this is the quote that's written in the book says, "Love is but the discovery of ourselves in others and the delight in the recognition." So this is really a beautiful card because this is saying that you, the two of you are really learning and growing in how to acknowledge each other's experiences, how to be in each other's shoes. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to agree with the person. It just means that you are able to see things from their perspective. So for some of you, there may have been a situation where your love, your beloved, has gone into a karmic situation or has chosen to remain in a karmic situation, and you're really frustrated and confused about why they would do that. Why would somebody walk away from a divine love connection, something this amazing, in order to stay in something that you consider more like a lower vibrational connection or something that's not as sacred? But you can also move into a space of what empathy would be is like, I don't necessarily agree with the choice, but I understand why this person might have made that decision. So for instance, let's say that they have children, young children with this karmic partner, or they have family obligations with this person. Maybe it's something about their religious background and the social environment that maybe their parents have certain expectations, and so they chose to go in that direction, not because it was necessarily in even their heart's desire as much as it was that they felt like this was something that was important and something that they needed to do. So empathy is being able to say, I don't agree with you, but I understand why you did what you did. Empathy is also about recognizing that you don't have to lose yourself in someone else's feelings, okay? Sometimes, especially in twin flame connections or people who identify with the twin flame label, they get kind of caught up and trapped in the other person's experience, the other person's feelings, without necessarily knowing how to individuate and separate themselves from that and allow the person to have their own experience, and also allowing yourself to have your own experience. So this is really a beautiful energy because what it's showing to me is that the two of you, if this reading is resonating for you, have really been on this path about trying to understand each other's experiences while not getting lost in them. So it's about being able to step into someone else's experience and to see things from their lens, from their perspective, without necessarily getting consumed or getting caught up in it. Okay? So this is helping you each to understand other people's feelings, other people's experiences, without necessarily needing to slap a label on it or judge it or do any of that stuff, but just being able to stand in the space of really deep, compassionate understanding. So I really, really love that. So I want to look now at what the purpose of this connection is for you right now. So I'm using the Melanated Classic Tarot, and I'm going to shuffle a few times. I want to see, what is the purpose right now? What is it that you're supposed to be learning? What are you supposed to be, are the two of you supposed to be growing, etc. Okay. So the first card, beautiful. We have the King of Cups. The next card, ooh, the Ace of Swords. Interesting. And the Nine of Swords. So I really feel this is beautiful. I mean, it's just such beautiful energy here, because what I see with this is that the purpose and what you're supposed to be learning right now, the King of Cups is, I really love the King of Cups because it's a very solid type of energy. It's a very powerful, very grounded type of energy that's coming through. The King of Cups is like rules the kingdom with heart and with logic. The King of Cups is in touch with their emotions, but doesn't let their emotions run the show. The King of Cups is like the person who can feel deeply and still get up in the morning and do what needs to be done. Like, this is where it's a very mature emotional flow, where it's very open-hearted communication, very engaged, feels very powerful, but it's powerful in like water. Okay, so what I mean by that is that water is powerful because it's not forceful, it just flows, right? But if you put a boulder in the path of water and let the water continue going, it wears through the rock or over the rock over time. And so it is this very gentle but powerful type of energy that I'm sensing here. And so part of this is about learning part of what you're both learning is how to flow like that, how to flow with your emotions and how to be in that state of flow, in that state of going with the motion, going through what needs to be gone through, learning how to master your emotions so you can feel them. You know, you want to feel your emotions deeply. You want to definitely allow yourself to be touched and penetrated by life, right? But you also don't want your feelings to control you. You don't want to be the type of person who is up one minute and down the next just based on the circumstances of life. You want to learn how to keep your emotions in check and how to flow and to feel them, but also how to come out of those emotional situations so that you're not continuing to be in that energy. I hope that's making sense. The other energy that's coming through with this, the purpose of this situation is to see things in a different light. The Ace of Swords is like this aha moment. It's where things suddenly come clear, where things suddenly make sense, and things that you weren't certain about before, or that you didn't know before, or you were confused about before. Suddenly, with this emotional maturity and the growth that you're experiencing, you see things clearly. You're like, I get it now. I see the higher purpose. I see why this has happened. I see why these circumstances have come about the way that they've come about. And I feel like that's directly tied to the empathy card that came out earlier from the mirror deck. I feel like that is really an important aspect of this, because when we can see things clearly and we can see them from a different light, we have this emotional maturity, we're able to have empathy for people. We're able to see things from their perspective. So it's like, I'm thinking about a relationship that I had with a karmic partner in the past. And when I grew and was able to see things more clearly, the judgment and the story and the narrative that I was telling myself about this situation with this person shifted because I was suddenly able to see things through their experience, where I was able to understand that the way that they were raised and the lifestyle circumstances and the environment that they were exposed to had a direct impact on how they showed up later in life. Now that doesn't excuse it, okay? So I'm not going to say that it wasn't, that you just excuse it and are like, oh, it's just because of, they were the way they were raised, or this happened and that's why they're this way. Because we all have, at a certain point, we all have to learn to assume responsibility, and when we take responsibility, we make the necessary changes for our lives so that we don't continue perpetuating the same patterns. But empathy allows you to release the judgment and release the need to hold somebody accountable, or the desire to hold somebody accountable, and just know that maybe at a different level they were not as, they didn't mean to be as harmful as they were, or they didn't mean to do the things that they did. And that doesn't change the impact. It doesn't mean that you excuse it. It just means that you have a sense of compassion for the wounded part of them as well. I hope that's making sense. And this Nine of Swords, this is a card, if you look at it, the person is sitting in bed, hands buried, head buried in their hands, grieving, weeping, feeling a deep sense of pain. So with the part of the purpose of this is allowing you, for some of you, this situation allowed you to touch into like reservoirs of pain that you maybe didn't even realize that you had. For some of you, there may have been deep abandonment wounds that you had from your parents, or from childhood, first boyfriend, first girlfriend, something along those lines, where you really fostered a lot of pain. And I don't think for some of you even realized how deep it went. That it was, maybe you were able to acknowledge on some level, like, yeah, this happened and it was painful. But you didn't realize how deep it went, that it was really a core wound, and that core wound was really informing how you showed up in the world, and how you've done relationships, and how you've lived your life. And this situation, because it cut you so deeply, it was such a powerful and painful experience. It's allowed you to touch into that core wound. And when you touch into the core wound, you're able to heal it. You can't heal what you conceal, or you can't heal it if you don't even know it's there. And so I feel like because of this connection with this person was so deep and so intense, that when you ran into problems, or you ran into situations where there was pain, that it allowed you to actually access the depth of that core wound in a way that you might not have had you not encountered this person. So whatever they did, if they abandoned you, if they rejected you, it touched and it tapped in, and it allowed you to feel into that core wound that you weren't able to necessarily feel before, because the depth of the love that you felt for this person, or that you feel for this person, was so significant. The hopes that you had for the relationship, the expectations, the desires, all of those things were so intense that when it was so deep, that's how Spirit saying. The love that you feel, the love that you felt, the connection was so freaking deep that when that was removed, it actually allowed you to have access to those core wounds that you hadn't been able to see before. And I hope that's making sense, because I can see it in my mind's eye. I can see the way that Spirit is describing it. It's like when you're drilling, if you've ever watched people drilling for water, and it's like when you finally hit the that portion, right, the space where the water is, that comes gushing out. And that's sort of what happened in this situation for you emotionally, that you broke through the shell, you broke through the cover, or whatever it was that was there that had kept you from realizing the depth of the wound, and now you're able to feel it. Now, I know it sucks, right? Like, it's not fun. It's not a fun feeling to sit with those types of feelings, right? It's not, you're like, I don't really want to deal with these emotions. I don't want to feel that, but we have to feel it to heal it. And so that's why this has happened the way that it has. They gave you whatever lesson or whatever pain they gave you. It really was a sacred wound. It really was something that they gave and they offered and shared with you in order to help you grow and to be able to transform beyond where you've been into the next iteration of where you're going. So let's go ahead and move this aside and look at, I want to look at what is the past life connection. So I'm using the past life oracle cards by Doreen Virtue and Brian Weiss. If you've not read any of Brian Weiss's books, I highly recommend. He is a psychiatrist, I believe, and yes, he's a psychiatrist, and he does a lot of work with hypnotic regression, which is a really powerful modality. If you've never worked in that, I have, and it's really super powerful. But what happened with him is he is a very stoic type of classically trained psychoanalyst, didn't believe in a lot of the woo-woo kind of stuff, and had a patient who spontaneously regressed into a past life. And it was so life-changing that became kind of his focus. And so I believe that his books are, two of his books are Many Lives, Many Masters, and one is it's about soulmates. I don't remember the title, but it's really fantastic, so I would recommend that. But here's what I want to look at. What were the past life circumstances that led to where things are today? So what happened in past lives between the two of you, you and your sacred love partner, that you're encountering this circumstance now? Oh, wow. We have spouse. Okay. Phobias. And trees. Okay. So this person, you were married in a past life. Okay. So if you've ever wondered that, absolutely you were. There was that kind of deep bond. So this connection that you're thinking of, you did share that marriage vow. You shared that kind of connection in a past life, which you're probably already aware of. You've probably already felt it. So interesting. The phobias are what's really catching my attention right now, because what I'm feeling is that if some of you suffer from phobias, if there's something that you're afraid of right now, and it can be whether, a lot of times people think of like phobias as like being afraid of snakes or spiders or things like that. But sometimes they can be phobias of, being afraid of intimacy, being afraid of love, being avoidant, those kinds of things. But these are definitely, there's some energy blocks that you're experiencing because of some phobias in a past life. So this could be, for instance, if your person went off to war and left you, and then you have a deep abandonment wound in this lifetime. It may not even be about this lifetime as much as it is about that lifetime where they had to go to war, they were sent to war by the king or whatever, and then they never came back. And so it created this like soul level fear of being abandoned, being left behind, not having someone come back for you. That can be something. It can be that perhaps you, for some of you, I'm getting a message around that the two of you shared a child, had a child who maybe felt ill and died in a past life where there was not the medical availabilities and the healing modalities that we have nowadays, and it's created a phobia around loss. And so you may cling to things really tightly, even in a way that you might feel is unreasonable. You might have a conscious awareness that my fear of loss feels unreasonable. It feels bigger than what it should, and that's something that you're at least peripherally aware of, but it's something that you're really needing to face. That is, there's a saying, and I don't know who said it originally, but it says, when you're hysterical, it's historical. And so if you ever have situations where you feel yourself going into like hysterical responses, where you go into like panic or total freak out because of something that happens, most of the time that's rooted in something in the past, childhood or past life wounds. And so if you ever have those experiences where your fear your experience feels way bigger than the circumstances, that's a good indication for you to take a peek and to look at and say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is not exactly what I thought it was. Maybe it's something rooted in the past or in a past pain. So that's going to be really helpful. This is something like when you feel the phobic type of energies, it's something that shows that you're afraid of being vulnerable. And so you try maybe to control situations to make sure that that variable doesn't happen and you don't get caught up in that. So this is something that you can really look at the past life energies, whatever you start to feel. This reading is pretty specific right now for some of you with the phobias, with these fears, these deep soul level fears. And so for those of you, it's like, look at what it is that you're so deathly afraid of, okay? And then that shows you the source of the wounding, that then you can go into a space of healing. So I hope that makes sense. So the trees is interesting because I feel like for a lot of people that this is an energy of whatever experience that you shared in the past with this person in a past life. Perhaps your house, sorry, I was having a hard time getting that word out. Perhaps your house or your community was surrounded by trees. You lived in an area, maybe some of you have like past lives in Ireland, Wales, Scotland, where there's a lot of really beautiful greenery around. There is some energy around that. This also, for some of you, there may have been like a death or somebody that lost their life and was buried by a tree. And so you may have a particular draw to certain types of trees, or you may even feel repulsed by certain types of trees. Excuse me while I take a sip of my now cold coffee. But I had a big throat chakra activation happening there. Trees are also suggestive of a very spiritual connection, which of course, right, we're talking about sacred soul love connections here, sacred soul bonds. So of course it's a spiritual element here. But this is really saying that this energy of being able to share messages with each other psychically, energetically, has been around for a really, really long time. And so I feel like for some of you, you might have in the past felt like it was weird. Like maybe some of you are like, is it real? Do I really feel these messages? Do I really feel this energy from this person? Or is it just in my imagination? And so I feel like that's something to be really mindful of. Some of you may have even had in your situation with your counterpart, the person you're thinking of, your beloved, that you may even have had a situation where it was like a forbidden Romeo and Juliet type of love, where one of you was like higher social position than the other, and so you weren't allowed to have a connection. It was forbidden. And so you might have gone in to have little rendezvous by trees. You might have had a certain tree that you met by, where you connected or you exchanged notes, where you passed love notes to each other that way, and that was the only way you could really communicate. Or you'd have to sneak out in the middle of the night to be able to meet each other beneath a certain tree. And so there's definitely some energy there. I would encourage you that if this reading is resonating, to really spend some time meditating on this, meditating on whether or not this feels aligned, whether it feels accurate, whether it feels like it's something that is it feels aligned. And meditate on trees, even meditate by a tree. If you have a tree nearby, go sit beneath a tree and meditate and listen, truly listen to see if the tree has any messages for you that you might be able, that might help to clear up some of this past life energy that's tying the two of you together. Excuse me. It's not a bad thing to have past life energy unless it's keeping us stuck and creating energetic blocks. And so if there's, for instance, a phobia tied to this person about abandonment or loss, then perhaps this message is coming through to say, like, heal that. And then once you're healed of that phobia of loss, abandonment, rejection, whatever that might be, it actually creates space for you to be able to engage in a much more loving way with this person without all the attachments and all of the fears, okay? So let's go ahead and look at what do we need to let go of in order to move this connection forward. By the way, I will be coming out to Long Beach to Energy House in September. And so we're going to be putting out the information. If you're not following Energy House, please do. On Insta, it's Energy, Haus. And I'll be putting out some information about that soon. But it's going to be a pretty rad day. So stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and look at what it is that you needs to be released. This is The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beatty. Okay. So the first card that comes out, accepting my imperfections. Today, I will tell myself that who I am is okay and that what I'm doing is good enough. Of course, I make mistakes and get off track sometimes, but that doesn't mean that I'm not as good as everyone else. No one is perfect, and that's just fine. Taking risks. Today, I will ask God to help me to take healthy risks. I will ask for assistance in letting go of my fear of failure and success. I will ask for help in fully living my life so that I can start experiencing all the wonderful parts of my journey. And lastly, maintaining boundaries. Oh, I like that one. Today, I will gain a new awareness of those areas where I need healthier boundaries. I will release my naive assumption that the other person is always right. I will acknowledge that view for trusting and listening to myself and setting and maintaining healthy boundaries. So really beautiful energies here, because what this is saying to me is that for a lot of us, accepting imperfections is such a huge thing. There's so much in our society and our culture about needing to be perfect, right? And if you grew up in an unhealthy environment where you had parents, for instance, that were like, everything needs to be perfect, or they had these implicit messages that you had to be perfect or you weren't good enough, we can internalize that and really make it our own story, where it's like, I'm never good enough, nothing I do is enough, so on and so forth. And that's a really heavy weight to live with. And sometimes when we have that kind of experience of ourselves, we can project that expectation onto people in our lives, that we expect them to be perfect as well, which of course is not possible. So what you need to let go of, what's needing to be released right now, is this idea that you can be perfect. There is no such thing as perfection. We're all flawed in some way. And our flaws are actually what make us beautiful, right? Otherwise we'd be a bunch of like Stepford wives where everything is the same, there's no personality, there's no difference, there's no magic. And that sounds like a pretty boring world to me. So this is a really important energy that for like beginning immediately to start accepting those imperfections. Like, so you screwed up, big deal. Do better the next time, accept it, and move forward. The other energy that's really important here is about taking risks, okay? So many times, especially people that have experienced trauma in their lives, have huge difficulties with taking reasonable risks. And I mean, like, when I say reasonable, I mean like wise. You don't want to be foolish about it, right? But it's like one of those things around that I often talk about is like roller coasters. I know people who are like terrified of roller coasters, and the reality is that it's not the risk, the threat of being in a roller coaster is like less than even driving in your car every day, and most of us don't think twice about that. It's things like sharks. People have this like terrifying fear of being bit by a shark, but you're more likely to die. Literally, this is actually a fact. Statistically, you're more likely to die falling on a chair in a kitchen chair than you are to be attacked by a shark. So that's what I'm trying to say here, is that we have to be realize that sometimes what we feel is risky it's not reality based. Okay, something that like risking rejection, asking somebody out, expressing interest, and they say no or they're not interested. Gosh, I remember the first time that I gave a guy my number, because I've just never been the type to just give somebody my number. There's this you guys are gonna kind of laugh. This is a funny story, but there was this like super hot barista at the Starbucks I used to go to, and I was like, I'm gonna give this guy my number, and then I like chickened out and I didn't. And then like the next time I went in, not the next time, but a couple times later, he was there again. And I got my drink, went out to my car, and I literally had this like full blown, like almost like panic moment where I was like, I really want to give this guy, like, just slip in my number and whatever. But I literally felt like I was gonna die. Like I literally felt that level of panic, and I'm laughing because it was so ridiculous at the time. But I mustered up the courage and I wrote my number, or I don't know, I had a business card. So I wrote something on my business card, and I like walked back in and I gave it to him. And I literally was like, oh my God, I think I'm it. It was so freaking funny, because I called my friend Trisha afterwards and I like told her what happened, and she was like, we were just like cracking up because it was so over the top. But that was a risk for me because it was not something I had done. But my reaction, my panic, my fear was way out of proportion for what was actually happening. So I share that to say that for some of you, you got to just take a risk. Like, give that person your phone number, tell somebody that you like them, apply for that job, whatever it might be that you've been holding back from because of your fear. Remember the phobia that came up earlier? You're like, oh my gosh, if I do this, it's, I might die. That's how it feels when you're facing something that's like a phobia, even though you know, like, logically that it's not real. But it's really important to take that risk, to go ahead and do that thing that you're most afraid of within reason, right? And recognize that it's important to allow yourself to get out of your comfort zone. Well, also maintaining boundaries. Now, this is an important energy too, because you don't want to get into a space where where your boundaries are just so loose that you're not able to differentiate between yourself and others, and your needs and others' expectations. So this is like really cultivating boundaries. What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? What feels good? What feels bad? What feels appropriate? What feels inappropriate? Really sitting with that and maintaining those boundaries. It is okay. Some of you may not, I may need to hear somebody else just say, it is okay to say no to something that makes you feel uncomfortable. Whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's your lover, whether it's your boss, if it makes you uncomfortable, if you feel unsettled, go ahead and say no. It's okay to do that. It's okay to say things like, you know what, I need some time to think about that. Whatever that might be. But this is important for you to really establish yourself, releasing any kind of tendency to not have good boundaries. It's going to be really critical for you to be able to move forward into this next phase of your life and your relationship. So I hope you guys don't mind when I share my little stories, but when it comes up, it feels important. So we're going to look at the challenges right now that are in this connection. I'm using the Lay of Empires deck by Lucy Cavendish. It's almost Virgo season. Whoop, whoop. I'm a Virgo. My birthday is coming up, and so I'm, birthday month for me. Not really. I'm not like a Leo is more likely to be like, hey, it's my birthday month. Virgos are more like, oh yay, it's my birthday. I actually forgot a couple of years back, which was funny. One of my friends texted me and was like, happy birthday, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is today. So yeah. Let's go ahead and see what the challenges are in this situation. Interesting. We have the monster within. Internal struggles, personal challenges, wanting to improve. That death will come. And reason. I love it. Okay, so the monster within. Some of you are wrestling with that perfection card that came up earlier, right? Some of you are really struggling with that. Like, how do I how do I maintain this struggle with this monster within, this half wolf, half woman, kind of half wolf, half man type of energy, half wolf, half person for those that are non-binary. But this internal struggle with trying to tame your inner beast and also be who you are, like the struggle with it, like Beauty and the Beast, and how do I do this, and that kind of archetype of being tame but maintaining your wildness at the same time, right? Those are all things that are a struggle right now, and it's a challenge because there's this energy of really wanting to grow. A lot of you have been like really wanting to grow, really wanting to transform, shift out of something, but have been struggling to get there. I've been really struggling with letting things go that no longer serve, for allowing things that new things to come in. There's really been an intense struggle where you feel like sometimes the wolf is winning, right? There's that old saying that in every person, an old man's telling his grandson, in every person there's a wolf, and that wolf or that energy is like greed and avarice and self-centeredness and selfishness and all of those things. And then the other side is like gentleness and kindness and love, and that they wrestle within us constantly. And the young man says to his grandfather, well, who wins? And grandfather says, the one you feed. So for some of you, you've been really struggling with something, and part of the reason why you continue to struggle with it is because you continue to feed it. So if you struggle with self-doubt and you continue to feed yourself self-doubt, you're going to continue to feed that beast. If you start believing in yourself and stop letting go of the need for perfection, where it's like, well, yeah, maybe I didn't do that entirely right, but that doesn't make me a bad person. I'm not a failure because I didn't do something perfect. That's an important thing to understand. If you struggle with self-love, beating yourself up isn't going to get you anywhere. Loving yourself as you are is going to be a good place to start. So if you struggle with self-love, find something about yourself that you really like. Okay, find something about yourself that you appreciate. Maybe you have really pretty hands. Maybe you've got really great nails, right? Maybe you have perfect eyebrows and you don't even need to pluck them. Whatever it might be, find that one thing that you can really love and admire and appreciate about yourself, and focus on that instead of the things that you struggle with, that you're not necessarily, ravishingly in love with about yourself. But focus on feeding the things that you want to have more of and less of the things that you don't want. It's like the law of attraction, right? It's like what we focus on increases. So if you focus on love, you focus on abundance, you focus on joy and all of those good, yummy feelings, you create more experiences of those. The other challenge is that this energy of feeling mortal, that there's a finite and sort of a fragility about being alive, about being human. And so for some of you, there's a challenge around that, in the sense that you understand on an intellectual level that life is short and it's finite and we only have a certain amount of time on this earth. And also, so you know that like in a cognitive way, but you're not necessarily living your life as you understand that you feel like maybe you make choices like, I'd have forever, I'll just continue to wait, or I'll continue to put this off because I'm afraid to take a risk. And so this card to me is saying like, stop fucking wasting your time. That's my interpretation. Like, don't waste time. Understand that life is short. We're not mortal. We're not vampires. We're not immortal. We don't live forever. We will eventually die. Okay. And so recognizing that and thinking about it, like if you look at your life and you're like, okay, what would I do if I found out that I only had a year to live? What would you do differently? And I'm really encouraging you to sit with that. If you realized that you only had a year or 6 months left to live, what would you do differently? How would you live every day? Would you wake up every day feeling depressed and despondent, or would you choose to be like, you know what, I have 1 year, I'm going to make the best of it? And so I really encourage you to sit with that question, meditate on that question, even journal about it. What would I do if I knew I had a limited amount of time, and how would I live differently? So maybe you've been afraid to do certain things because whatever phobia or fear that you have about it. But if you knew that you only had 24 hours left to live or 6 months left to live, that you might be like, I'm going to call that person and tell them I love them and I will always love them even if I never see them again. And so freaking what if they don't respond or they don't care or whatever. I'm speaking my truth and that's it. And whatever the outcome is not my problem. I just need to be truthful and honest about who I am, right? That might change how you approach things. And then we also have reason here. So one of the challenges is that for some people, they may not be listening to advice or thinking clearly. I'm going back to that King of Cups that came through earlier, because the King of Cups is very emotional, but is also engaged with reason and intellect. And so some of you may have been getting advice from me or other readers or friends or personal readings or private readings or whatever that's coming through that's telling you to do something that you haven't been listening to. And because of that, because you haven't been listening to the advice, you haven't been taking these things seriously, it's kind of keeping you stuck. It's keeping this relationship feeling challenged as opposed to being able to move forward. And so whatever there is where you feel like, or maybe you haven't been thinking clearly, where you've not engaged with reason, that you've been hyper-focused on something else, like a fantasy. I wrote an article a while back on Medium. You can go check it out if you want there. It's Dr. Lisa Vallejos, and I talked about in this article about knowing when it's time to let go of a soul connection. And there was 3 reasons or 3 indications that it's time to let go, and that's if it's been a year or more without any substantive communication between you and your person. The second one is if they're married or in a committed relationship, like they have a karmic partner, and they're not making any steps toward leaving that relationship or moving forward out of that. And the third one is if there's any type of abuse, like if they're mean or if they're unkind to you. Then that's a sign that it's time to let go. And maybe you've heard that advice. Maybe you've heard from people that it's time to let go and move in a different direction and to release this person with love and with compassion, with empathy. But you've been hesitant to do that. Well, that may be time to listen to that, because it's actually creating a challenge and keeping people from being able to move forward in a more positive direction. Now, the ironic thing about this is that when we release the energy of being attached to a person, then we create a more energetic space of freedom where they're able to come forward if they want to, and that you don't need them to. And then it becomes a relationship and a love that's based on liberation as opposed to need and attachment and so on and so forth. So those are the challenges for this connection. And I want to look now, I'm pulling back out the Melanated Tarot. And we're going to look at some outcomes, like what's likely to happen with this situation, should you choose to follow the advice that came through and listen to the messages that came out. Now, I want to say that tarot is not predictive, okay? So what I mean by that is that it's not like anything is, what is that? Like carved in stone. That's the phrase. Nothing is carved in stone. This is energetic. This is an energy for right now. This is like what's happening right now. And should you choose to, King of Cups just came out again. Should you choose to follow the advice, this is the current trajectory of the energy. But if you do something different, if you make different choices, if you take those risks, set those boundaries, follow reason, so on and so forth, you can shift the outcome, okay? So if we follow this current trajectory, what's going on right now, this very moment, this is kind of the outcomes or the lessons that we can expect. All right, Spirit, some messages about outcome, please. So the first one, we have the Hermit in reverse. The next one, we have the Nine of Wands. I love it. And the Ten of Pentacles. Wow, really beautiful. So the Hermit in reverse is about coming out of that self-imposed isolation. So the Hermit is really about, the Hermit really goes deep within to focus on growth and transformation and moving forward. Now, I'm going to be very clear also, by the way, that I do read intuitively, and so my interpretations and what comes through may not be exactly to the book. So just be mindful of that. But the energy that I'm getting is coming out of this isolation, coming out of the spiritual cave and moving back toward each other, moving back toward something like a higher love connection, moving back toward humanity, like the rest of humanity, like the rest of the world, and coming out of the cave, not being blocked off anymore, not shutting themselves off anymore. We also have this Nine of Wands. And what's interesting here is that I'm seeing this card because this is about being kind of it's a defensive stance. It's a defensive posture. Somebody who's kind of felt like they were being attacked on all ends and needing to really release that. And so when I see this card here, what I'm seeing is that this is about releasing and letting go of that need to defend and need to protect this yourself, or feel like you need to be guarded on all these things. And so I just feel like what this is saying here is that what's likely ahead is that it's like this test of boundaries, of self-sufficiency, of accepting yourself and not needing to feel perfection, or feeling like you're perfect. It cycles back every now and then. And it's like, have you grown? Have you transcended this? Have you transformed this? And this is like really saying that I feel like for a lot of you that you're really just going to be like, you know what? I just really want to not have to feel guarded and defensive all the time. I really want to reach a space of spiritual balance, and I really want to move past this idea of my self-image of being like wounded, of feeling, do you see this guy as like, looks kind of like he got his ass kicked. And you may feel sometimes like you've gotten your ass kicked by life. But what I see here is with this, the way that the energy of these cards is flowing, is that releasing that need to feel like your self-image is wounded, or that you were really hurt by whatever happened in this situation, and it kind of put you in a space where you just went into isolation and you kind of went into hiding. But what's happening and what's likely ahead is that you move through those energies and move into this energy of the Ten of Pentacles. This is like, it's like happy home, happy life. It's like they could be at a wedding here. They've got 2 dogs, a little kid in the background. There's this older person who could be, I don't know, like officiating a wedding, whatever. But what it really comes down to is I feel like people are in this space of you move through this stuff, you move through these energies, and you're like now more capable of creating this type of life where you feel good, where you feel supported, you feel loved, you feel abundance, you feel like, pentacles all around, right? Cash raining, whatever you want to use. But this is really saying that like a sense of solid physical stability here in the material world with a partner. Look, this is not an energy of someone who's doing it alone. This person's alone, but what you're headed to is surrounded by love, community, abundance, literally like, making it rain, pentacles raining down on you, abundance, flow, maturity, growth. And so what I feel like this is really about is like moving out of these energies where you're not feeling like you're trapped and that you have to be guarded and defensive all the time, but you heal those past life wounds, you heal those past life energies, and able to enable yourself to move toward this abundance. The abundance is going to be really important for you. It's going to be really, it's there, because I'm seeing this happening for a lot of you, following this advice, doing the things that you've been guided to do. is going to really create a space in the very near future where you're going to have a financial windfall, where you may even meet somebody or come back to connection with your love, that your beloved that you're thinking about in this reading. For some of you, that isn't an option. For some of you, they're in a different situation. Maybe they're a karmic partner or whatever. And so moving toward them is not an option right now, but maybe some of you are willing to move toward like a soulmate connection. And when you choose that, when you move in that direction, you're actually going to create the space and the energy for it, and it's going to come back really quickly. It's going to come back and it's going to manifest really rapidly. I feel for some of you, even within the next 2 to 4 weeks, that you'll meet somebody or you'll reconnect with somebody that is a soulmate. That you've made this decision, you've decided that you're ready to move toward abundance and happiness, and you create that energy, you create the space for it, and boom, it shows up for you. So I hope that this reading was resonant. It went a lot longer than I was expecting it to, but such is life. So be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, show me some love here in the comments, and I'll be happy to reconnect with you. And I will see you all soon on the other side. Love you. Bye.